today with actor, director, producer, writer Ed Burns. Thank you so much for being on our cover.
Yeah, of course. How are
The
you?
holidays are coming up and new movies coming out.
Yep.
So, and obviously born and raised on Long Island.
Valley Stream,
You know,
Long
Valley
Island.
Stream, way to go. So, one question I have right off the bat is, we often see actors turn directors, directors turn producers. Sometimes we don't even hear about the writer. From the get-go, you've done every vocation and you've maintained it.
Yeah.
How do you keep that going?
You know, when I went to school up at SUNY Albany, I went there because I thought I either wanted to be a journalist or a novelist, maybe both. While I was up there as an English major, I became a film studies minor. And it was only after taking those sort of film appreciation classes that I fell in love with movies. And I sort of gave up the dream of being a novelist and instead focused on being a screenwriter. I told my dad about this shift. He sent me a screenwriting book. I sat down and wrote my first screenplay. And the minute I was done with it, it was an autobiographical script about, you know, sort of my high school years on Long Island. And I just thought, well, there's no way I could sell this screenplay and have someone else direct it. You know, they wouldn't know exactly, you know, what that experience really felt like, what it would look like, what it would sound like. So I thought, I'm going to have to direct this film myself. And then I realized, well, I better take some filmmaking classes. So I left SUNY Albany, I went to Hunter College here in Manhattan, and started taking film production classes. And you know, what you do when you start is, back then, you know, now you shoot everything digitally, but back then you shot black and white silent movies. Those were your first films.
Right.
And I didn't know any actors, so I would put me and my friends in the films. And then I made a 15-minute film that actually had some dialogue. And again, I cast me and my buddies. And I started to just enjoy acting in my films. I mean, I really never gave any consideration to being an actor outside of my student films. Then when I decided I was going to make a super no-budget feature film, which turned out to be The Brothers McMullen, I figured I would just give myself one of the roles in the film. McMullen turns into what McMullen does, and the next thing I know, you know, not only do I have a career as a writer-director and a writer-director-actor in my own films, I start then getting phone calls and offers to go act in, you know, big Hollywood studio films, which I had never anticipated ever being part of, you know, the career path or the dream. Mm-hmm. And after my third film, I got an offer for a film called Saving Private Ryan, and obviously you're not going to say no to Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, so that was the first film that I ever acted in that wasn't one of mine. And you know, since then, you know, it's been 15 years since Ryan, 17 years since McMullen. I have just been juggling these two different careers, you know, writer, director, actor, producer, and my indie films, and then fortunate enough to keep acting in studio movies.
Now, as a director, do you ever clash with yourself as the actor or the writer?
No, you don't really. It doesn't really, quite honestly, work like that. You know, like when you're the screenwriter, you first of all you know the world so well, obviously, because you created it. But more importantly, as I'm writing, I'm thinking about my performance while I'm writing, and I start to. Sometimes I don't know what part I'm going to play. But once I settle on that, I'm kind of making my acting choices, for better or worse, in my writing room while I'm doing it. So by the time we eventually get around to shooting the film, I kind of know what I expect from the character I'm going to play, the kind of choices I want to make as an actor. Granted, any day on a set, an actor you're working with will bring something different that you didn't anticipate. That's going to change your performance. There's always scenes that are just tricky as an actor, or just, you know, heavier lifting. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky I have a producer named Aaron Lubin and a director of photography, William Rexer, who's from Huntington, actually. We've done, I think, 7 or 8 films together. Those two guys are the guys that direct me on certain days when there's a scene that I don't think I can be sort of a completely objective judge of my performance.
When you're writing, are you thinking what is someone going to think when they read this, or what is someone going to think when they see this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky in that, given that I make these indie films and I'm also, so I don't need big budgets, and the fact that I'm also the director, I don't write screenplays that satisfy the reader.
Right.
You know, it's a blueprint for what we're going to shoot. So I'm only thinking about what the film will look like, and more importantly, my films are dialogue heavy, so more what will they sound like.
How much did Long Island influence Brothers McMullen?
I mean, I think Long Island has influenced everything I've done. I mean, it's been the major influence on probably why I ended up wanting to be a writer in the first place. You know, growing up 28 minutes from Times Square, you know, my dad was a cop in New York City. We were constantly in Manhattan when we were little kids. Both of my parents went to high school in Manhattan, so they were always bringing us into the city, telling us that, you know, Long Island is great for your childhood, but when it's time to go, you know, make shit happen, if you will, you better get across that river. My mother also was, you know, a theater buff, so, you know, for our birthdays, she would take us in to see Broadway shows. The first play I saw was Neil Simon's Brighton Beach Memoirs. That immediately, I got excited about the theater and storytelling. She was also a Woody Allen fanatic, so she turned me on to Woody, and again, then sort of studying Woody, a kid from Brooklyn, moves to Manhattan, making his films. So a big part of, I think, just choosing a creative path for my life had to do with growing up in the shadow of Manhattan. You know, and then also just, you know, the more direct influences. You know, I love my Long Island childhood. You know, I look on it with great nostalgia. So whether it's, you know, McMullen, half of the movie is, you know, it's about these Long Island kids and their relationship with Manhattan. You know, she's the one, you know, I transposed the family into Brooklyn, but still bridge and tunnel guys having those experiences. I think if I look at every film, I mean, there is some Long Island component to all the movies.
Now, with that film, you lucked out with having a relatively low budget, Robert Redford seeing it, grossing millions of dollars, and that was by, I guess, sheer chance that all just came together. So you now have script, and the winner of that gets a chance to have their film created, or...
What is Script, the website?
Yes.
That's not real. Script is a website that, or I should say, it's a screenwriting software that, unlike something, let's say, some of the other software providers for writing screenplays, are, you know, sort of pricey. So if you're a kid in high school or college, it provides you with free screenwriting software. So we did a contest a couple of years ago, but it wasn't about us helping them make the film. It was sort of us. Me and my producer sort of being a tutor, I guess, for young screenwriters and trying to help them finish their first screenplay and give them some guidance into proper, you know, or more traditional screenwriting structure.
What's your advice for those people who want to get that film seen, or the script read?
It's tricky, you know. I mean, there's a great catch-22, which, you know, I mean, I wrote 7, well, I should say the catch-22 first. It's, you know, you can't get your script read by anyone in Hollywood unless you have representation. You know, no one will accept an unsolicited screenplay. However, you can't get an agent unless you've already sold the screenplay. Right. I had to deal with that for 4 or 5 years and 7 screenplays from the time I left Hunter College, or from that very first screenplay, actually, the Long Island script I told you about, through until Brothers McMullen. I realized, well, I'm not going to be able to get an agent, because every script I had, I bombarded anyone in Hollywood who represented screenwriters, every production entity, studio, agent. They received a copy of my screenplay. Needless to say, nobody read it because I didn't have an agent. So I was like, well, if I'm going to break into the business, I've got to go and do this myself. And, you know, we made Brothers McMullen for $25,000. But even then, I go to film schools all the time. I'm at film festivals, you know, a dozen or so a year. I meet versions of myself, young kids who have made their first film, and, you know, they still can't get an agent. So there is no answer to how you get that screenplay read. There are no two paths that are even remotely similar, which is good news, because there's no set route into the business. There are, millions of routes in. So that's sort of good news for folks, and actually bad news, because there is nothing that you can really follow. A lot of it is luck, but it's primarily, I think, persistence.
With the role that the internet's playing, how do you feel that that's affecting the motion picture distribution part of the industry? And I'm, of course, referring to Purple Violet, exclusively for iTunes.
Yeah, a couple of changes have happened with how people are, consuming films and where they're watching films. When I got into the business in '95, the only place to see independent film was at at an art house movie theater. And a great thing kind of happened in the late '90s where indie film got very popular, and every major studio started their indie division, and smaller art house theaters started to open up all over the country. And the audience back then in the '90s, this is predating original programming on all of the cable stations. This is before HBO gave us The Sopranos and Sex and the City, long before AMC was giving us Mad Men and Breaking Bad. It's long before gaming was really an option, before Facebook, MySpace, whatever, a long list of stuff, iPads, none of that stuff existed. So on a Tuesday night, if you didn't want to stay home and watch Friends, your only other option was really maybe to go to the movies. Right. What happened, probably in the late '90s, but more people say it's more like '06 is when the business really started to change. All of a sudden, the audience, we were fighting against all of those other options to get the audience's attention. And they stopped showing up to the art house theater the way they used to. So a lot of the distribution companies started to go out of business, and a lot of those theaters started to close. I mean, I grew up on the island. Brothers McMullen played in there was a theater in Valley Stream on Sunrise Highway that played Brothers McMullen and other art house movies. That's gone. There was another one in Rockville Center that played art house movies. McMullen played there. That's gone. So, I just drove Sunrise Highway the other day and I saw 2 of my theaters gone. Wow. So that's indicative of what's happened in the business. So that's the bad news. The good news is that the internet and sort of digital streaming, or we'll just say digital distribution, has shown up. And when you used to open your art house film, you would open in New York and LA, and then slowly you would platform to the next 5 to 20 markets, and then if the movie really was doing well, you would then get out into the burbs. That is very tricky to do today for all the reasons that I just gave you. So now the difference is, and this is back in '07, we experimented with this film Purple Violets. It was the first film to be offered exclusively on iTunes. The reason was, rather than open up a film on one screen in LA and one screen in New York, keep our fingers crossed that the grosses were good enough to warrant the next 5 cities, we thought, well, if we go out on iTunes, we're in 25 million homes on that day that we come out. And back then, there weren't nearly as many titles on iTunes, and that film did very well. We then took it a step further in '09, or maybe 2010, with this movie I made called Nice Guy Johnny, where we offered it exclusively on iTunes and VOD, movies on demand. That then put us in 45 million homes. And last year we did it with a movie called Newlyweds, and what's happened is, for the first time since Brothers McMullen, I'm making money as an independent filmmaker, because we're making the films on lower budgets, but more importantly, we have access to such a bigger potential audience.
Are you concerned with piracy?
That's an issue, but I mean, it's probably more of an issue with a film like The Avengers than it is with my films. You know, I mean, I think the people that like my movies, for the most part, are kind of cool buying it. I mean, I'm sure there's, piracy affects everybody and makes a dent in everybody's back end. But my dent is much smaller by comparison to some other folks.
Right. So you have 2 movies coming out. You have Alex Cross coming out a couple weeks, and then on November 21st you have Fitzgerald Family Christmas, which you wrote and directed and starred.
Yeah.
So tell us first about Alex Cross.
Alex Cross is based on a James Patterson novel, and Rob Cohen, who directed Triple X and Fast and the Furious, directed it. And what Rob wanted to do with this character, in the books and even in the first 2 films, they made Kiss the Girls and I forget, Along Came a Spider. They were more procedurals, and Rob wanted to turn this into much more of an action thriller, and he did so, and it's amazing. And so I play a guy named Tommy Kane. I am Alex Cross, who's played by Tyler Perry. I am his childhood best friend and partner. We're detectives in the Detroit PD. Matthew Fox plays a homicidal lunatic. He's killing some people, and we got to get rid of him. It was essentially it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then the connection between Tyler Perry led you to
write and make Fitzgerald. Yeah. So Tyler had rewatched Brothers McMullen, and afterwards we were having lunch, and he says, "Look, McMullen and She's the One, love these 2 movies. They're both about these Irish American families, and I know they both were very successful. How come in 15 years you've never gone back and sort of re-explored that world?" And I didn't have an answer other than I was doing some other things. I was making some other movies about, other folks, I guess. He said, "Look, you got to take it from me. You got to learn to super serve your niche." He goes, "I can guarantee you, the audience that really had a connection with those 2 films, if you give them another story about an Irish American family, they're going to thank you for it. They're going to really want to see it." And again, I'm on Twitter all the time, and I'm on Facebook, and for years, people, or even when I went to festivals before, Twitter and Facebook, people would always say, when are you going to make another one of those Irish movies? Like your first 2 films, your early films. So he was right. So the next day I opened up my laptop and I just started typing interior of the Fitzgerald's Kitchen Day. I had some loose ideas. I knew I wanted to I had an idea about a movie about a guy who who runs his family's bar, and he has to kind of take care of, he had a couple of siblings who were screw-ups. I also had an idea about a film about a big family. In the Fitzgeralds, there are 7 siblings. I have a good friend of mine who's one of 9, another one who's one of 12, and they always told me crazy stories about what it was like to grow up in that kind of house. So I think those 2 things were in my head when I started to sit down and write. And I didn't really know that I was going to make a Christmas film until I kind of stumbled upon or came up against, all right, I got a movie about 7 adult siblings. How am I going to get these 7 adults together? And then I thought, well, Christmas, everybody gets together on Christmas. And then the minute I came up with that, I could start to, I could see the story kind of laid out very easily in front of me. By the time I left Detroit, where we were shooting Alex Cross, I had the first draft done, gave it to my producing partner and said, what do you think? And he's like, this should be the next film. So we immediately, got back to New York, went into production. I kind of based it on, just sort of some of the stories I had heard growing up. So as I was writing, I was imagining my neighborhood in Valley Stream.
Right.
So I called up my mom, and we sold our house in Valley Stream. I said, who back home you think would let us shoot in their house? I said, it's like, I've written this film, the Fitzgerald family basically lives kind of like next door to us, And she said, let me call Tom and Tina Costello. And, it's a family I've known since I'm a little kid, and they opened their doors to the Fitzgeralds, and we're back in Valley Stream, so.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And since this comes out during the holiday, what are some of the things you like to do around the holidays? Any family traditions or?
No, I mean,
things like
you
that?
know, it's kind of basic, and it's sort of, in a weird way, that's kind of what the movie's about. You know, the movie is a celebration of family, and you know, everyone's family has, you know, some tricky history, some conversations that people would rather just let's get through the holiday and let's not have that thing brought up. But you know, when you do the tough work, let's say, and you have that tough conversation, a lot of times you get the rewards that follow that sort of reconciliation. So that's kind of what I was trying to do in the film. You know, early on in the writing of the screenplay, I was like, all right, there's two kind of Christmas movies. There's, you know, Love Actually, which is, you know, funny and sort of more romantic. And then there's, you know, my favorite, It's a Wonderful Life, which is, you know, a little bit more dramatic and tough. And Jimmy Stewart's got to go through some real dark patches. But in the end, you get the payoff of, you know, like the heartfelt and the tears are flowing and the family comes together. So we tried to go for a little bit more of It's a Wonderful Life.
Cool. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I think that kind of covers it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, man, appreciate that. Yeah.
Hey, can I help you?
Yeah, I'm Jerry Fitzgerald. Just wanted to wish her a happy holiday. It's Christmas Eve, and we've got this thing going on with my father and my whole family that is going to need to be addressed tonight.
Yeah, so you're gonna need a drink.
There's something I just want to discuss with the whole family. It's about Dad.
What about Dad?
He wants to spend Christmas with us here at the house.
All I want to be is with my family at Christmas. Does that sound reasonable?
No, that's definitely not happening.
That sounds awesome.
Does it sound awesome?
You think you're ready to see the old man?
I think we should ask Mom to let him come.
Maybe there was a time for some forgiveness.
Okay, I've thought about it. And the answer is still no.
I am more than okay with that.
You're all crazy.
How does she know my Jerry?
Oh, they met here yesterday.
If you can visit, I'll see you.
She seems like a nice girl. I thought I'd do them each a favor.
Maybe you could stay and we could have a drink.
But you never asked.
What brought you here tonight to this fine establishment?
I was waiting for my train.
Well, I got bad news. You missed it.
No, I missed my train.
Right, so
There's gotta be another train.
tonight.
He deserves to be there.
Does he? This is a guy who walked out on his family. I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, you know?
Have your brothers and sisters figure it out for themselves?
I know he hurt you, but he's still our father.
An angel just got their wings.
None for you, though, Pops.
Guess there's nothing else to say.
Can't we forgive our father just one day? Just one normal Christmas.
I had no intention of breaking his family up. What I wanted to do is pull you all together.
When he walked out on this family 20 years ago, I told him he would never set foot in my house again, and I am sticking to it.
You're with your family. That's what we do. We take care of one another. God, I'm happy to see you.